If we reflect on the character of those perpetrating this international coup, then those pseudo-psychopathic characteristics are exemplified in the Talmudic philosophy, taking delight in mockery of their assumed superiority over us, with sadistic mocking insertions in most if not all media. Possibly the most involved group in the control of organized societies, is one that permeates every aspect of it once you start to look. Throughout our lives we've heard vague references made to them, along with the veiled suggestions of a sinister connection with power. As most towns and cities have Masonic lodges, it's unsurprising that we know people who are members of them, mostly small businessmen and entrepreneurs, which leads us to see them as a seemingly mundane organization. While the vast majority of the Masonic order is indeed comprised of these lower members, it has to be said that their influence is far-reaching, and the upper section occasionally draws useful assets from the lower tiers. The Masonic order is analogous to a branch of the priesthood, with its own mythology, symbology and protocols. As with Judaism we see aspects of these sinister character traits, where childish ceremonial practices and retribution protocols adhere to their own brand of a belief system. There are many people who have studied their lineage and influence, and the story becomes confusing, especially when you consider the enigmatic historical timeline we have to work with. But along with certain sections of religious orders such as the Jesuits, they seem to play a central role in the organization of our world. The confusion regarding the Bible's true nature has me perplexed, where the feeling I have is that it's a work containing extremely significant information, regardless of whether or not its stories and messages are literal evidence, or complex hidden messages. Many of the Bible's passages are used in Masonic protocols, referencing things such as King Solomon, along with significance given to the pyramid builders. Throughout our given history we see that the characters involved in the most significant historical and scientific developments are Freemasons, and paintings make no attempt to hide this, even putting it in the face of anyone who knows what to look for. Whether it's Pythagoras, Kepler, Newton or a host of political figures, we see them set against a background of their symbology, with gestures including a hand inside a coat, a finger suggesting keeping quiet, or one eye being covered, along with their symbolic imagery of columns, aprons or set squares to mention but a few. Their occult, hidden connections are everywhere in both the historical record and current cultural manifestations, such as TV, film or other assorted media. As was mentioned earlier, the so-called hippie counterculture was a creation of these institutions, and every contemporary popular figure within them can be seen on multiple occasions recreating these symbolic gestures for the camera. It comes as a surprise to many people to learn that all major record companies have a room, usually in the basement, where new master copies of records undergo a ceremony, presumably to endow them with mystical energy to transmit to those listening. Remember the significance of cymatics. So we see that, far from being an insignificant organization, the Freemasonic connections are everywhere among us. So where does all this lead us? We live in a world where everything is an inversion of the truth, unless you have blind faith in authority, that is, which forces us to make certain assumptions. If pharmaceuticals were good for you, then they'd promote eating natural substances. If viruses existed, they'd tell us that illness was due to nature's toxins. If tobacco was poisonous, they'd tell us it was good for us. If we were descended from microorganisms, they'd tell us we were created. If democracy was a good thing, they'd persuade us it was bad. If greed, selfishness and ego were natural human attributes, they'd tell us we were naturally empathic. If the earth was a ball spinning in space, then they'd tell us our world was flat. All of this seems inextricably connected to keeping us confused, and the most significant thing we can do is either to stop listening to them, or listen to what they say and assume everything they tell us is the opposite to the truth. The main plank of their plans for the future involve the hoax that man is heating up the world dangerously. This covers a multitude of agendas, mainly restriction of travel and enforced control of energy, all under the guise of being for your safety. Another myth they've fabricated is overpopulation, where the target is to reduce our numbers. Independent researchers have calculated world numbers based on individual official town and city figures, and the conclusion is that we'd be lucky to dredge up 2.5 billion, as opposed to the official figure of 8 billion. If the cabal represent a group who've usurped power, then they might be aware of another worldwide catastrophe being due, and work towards their own survival and continued supremacy. Are the events of the last 5 years simply a distraction, so that they can plan saving their skins while keeping us looking the other way? Footage is regularly unearthed hinting at massive underground complexes, and if another worldwide disaster is due to hit, then these criminals will be squirreling away their ill-gotten gains in anticipation. If we are in Satan's little season, then it feels to me that it's coming to an end, and the awakening of millions of us across the world heralds its death throes, where their desperation to control us has been their undoing. I feel we have a natural intuition that's been methodically dismantled by this cult, but that we still have vestiges of it, and I remember one example when I was a child. When I was only about 10 years old or so, family members were talking about a time when I'd be going for a drink with my father one day, when I was older. Don't ask me why, but I somehow just knew that this would never happen. Sure enough, my father was killed when I was only 12, and this conversation and my instincts surrounding it would come back to me regularly. Similarly, over the last 5 years, I've had this instinctual feeling that the horror stories of being dragged away to detention camps, and the enforcement of an Orwellian nightmare society, will not be happening. I feel that we're part of a large production that we can't be lackadaisical about, so that even though we're going to get through this, we still have to fight back, following our instincts. I suppose it's analogous to being cast in a stage production of Gone with the Wind, where the story will always be the same, but if those playing Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara don't perform, or screw their lines up, then the production will be a disaster. While not wishing to place humans above other animals in the natural world, it has to be faced that we, uniquely, seem to be the only branch of it that can exercise conscious control of the world around us. Where other species have what we'd perceive as a pre-programmed routine, we've been granted a degree of discretion during our time here, but rather than see ourselves as superior, we have to think of ourselves as having a greater responsibility within this realm. This concept of what consciousness is, has always fascinated me, and the first 2 series of the television series Westworld had me gripped, where the automatons were given their own character roles, but had those character roles given to them by a creator, where a question was, when does a constructed machine become sentient? These characters would experience dreams, where vestiges of their previous programming in previous roles would come back to them as echoes, mirroring the concept of reincarnation. This world we perceive through our senses evokes a sense of stark reality, but in truth we experience the deeper aspects of philosophical and emotional turmoil whilst sleeping. This has led me to wonder whether reality is the dream, and the dream state is our true, spiritual reality. Do we interact with other animal spirits while asleep? If a cat wakes, has it been entered by a human in their dream state, only to revert back to sleep while awaiting another activation by another human's dream? I think all that we can do is follow our instincts to do what is right, given the purpose of moral responsibility towards humanity as a whole. I often think of it as allowing yourself to drift downstream with the tide, and trying not to fight too hard to reach the bank while being battered by the rocks. However informed we feel we are, we can never be in a situation where we can decide, logically and mathematically, how to navigate our lives. That direction seems to have been taken by those who've set themselves against us. An enigma, to I think all of us, is where do we come from? The natural world around us is filled with organisms like us, whose structure we find hard to comprehend, and so we largely put it out of our minds and leave it to science to work it out for us. In order for us to try and get a grasp of the mechanics involved, we'd need to invoke a perspective that we seem to no longer have. Think of it like this. Imagine we'd never known happiness. Could we try and extrapolate what the opposite to sadness would be? It strikes me that when we see the workings of any organism, it appears messy, squidgy, haphazard, but we perceive something through indoctrination that's been consciously created, as being able to see nuts, bolts, wiring. Is the concept of creation so beyond our possible comprehension, or is it possible to intuitively grasp a sense of it? Could God be an aspect of the mycelium of which we're an integral part? Our consciousness has been so wickedly aligned with the fabricators, the usurpers, throughout this little season, and maybe the spring is about to come.